Hello. Thank you for joining me. My name is Donovan from Salt of the Streets, and this is the review preview for the months of February and March of 2023. Our February book was Discrimination and Disparities by Thomas Sowell, and our March book is going to be 1984 by George Orwell. I'm going to be honest. Mistakes were made this month. There were some grave mistakes made that I didn't realize until about halfway through. This was a good book. I'm not going to disparage Thomas Sowell. He knows what he's doing, and I'm sure this has sold a bunch of copies. This is a good book. There's a lot of really valuable knowledge in here. This was a horrific choice for the book club because it is not interesting. And I realized probably about the first week of February when I rewatched the review preview that I did for The Indifferent Stars Above, and I was like, there's no way that this one will ever be as good as The Indifferent Stars Above. So I am going to go over some of the things that I found useful, some of kind of the basic concepts, and we are going to go from there onto the preview. Okay, so because this book is not extremely well fit for the book club itself, I'm just going to be brief, and I'm going to go over some of the lessons that I pulled from the book. And because this book is extremely interesting, there is a ton of stuff in here. Most of the examples used for Thomas Sowell to prove his points affect liberty and freedom in some aspect, even if it's just statistics that dictate your social standing or programs that you can achieve or different programs that might be available to you, things like that. So one of the things that I found useful about the book is that it teaches you consistently how to break down and understand different statistics and why they are built the way that they are and why they're presented the way that they are, and also how they're used to form, inform, and validate different social ideas. So one of the best examples for that, I think, is like college admissions amongst minorities. One of the examples that he gives when talking about that is the fact that these statistics are almost always given just whites versus blacks, which is not a helpful statistic for understanding where different racial groups exist at on the acceptance rates within colleges. And what he posits with that statistic, or why it's formed that way, is that they intentionally leave out Asian Americans because the pathway that their families and cultures have followed cuts against the ideology that statistic is meant to deliver, which is that blacks and minorities in general are at a disadvantage compared to whites, which is, again, like I said, seemingly proved false when you include other racial groups in the statistic. Another really good example that I talked to Colin about earlier this week was tax rates versus tax revenue. And I found this one to be particularly interesting. And what I mean by that is we are often told by the powers that be, by Democrats especially, that Republicans want tax cuts for the rich. They want to bring down the tax rate that they pay, the effective tax rates, and they want them to go from whatever we want them to pay, whatever Democrats want them to pay, 73% or whatever it is, down to 25%. And how could they want this? Because these people don't pay their fair share, as it is, the millionaires, the billionaires, all the everything, right? The things that they don't tell you when they discuss these tax rates are the effective tax revenues that are brought in when those rates are brought down. So what do rich people want? Colin, you tell me, what do rich people want?
Rich people want to hide their money.
They want to keep their money, right?
That's right.
So
want to keep their money.
They want to keep their money. So they're going to find any way they can to hide it to keep the best possible. If it doesn't make sense to keep it here, they're not going to keep it here. They're going to find other different ways to squirrel it away, whether it is going to be stocks, private securities, different bank accounts in other countries, or to whatever they can do that's going to make sure they can keep the most of their money possible, right? If that thing isn't here, they will go to another country. They're happy to do that. We've seen that. We hear about it all the time. Ireland is a big place. Different Pacific Islands, like things like that. Huge tax havens for all these different rich people, right? We hate it. It's horrible. Why are they doing this? They don't want to pay their taxes. It's because here we're trying to charge them somewhere between 60 and fucking 90% at one point in time to what they're doing over there, 20%, 25%, what they are seeing as much more reasonable amounts of money, right? So when they are filing their taxes here, you hear about Jeff Bezos, Donald Trump, people who have immense amount of money that are paying $2,000 in their federal taxes, or they're getting tax returns of like $9, right? We hear that. We're very upset. How could this happen? They have billions of dollars. They're the richest people around. Elon Musk, blah, 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 blah. How could this happen? It's because most of the things, their taxable assets and income is somewhere else, somewhere with a lower effective tax rate. So, in theory, and has been proven in the past through different administrations, when you lower the effective tax rates to lower than what those people are getting outside of the country, they bring their money home because they're willing to pay a lower tax rate on their money, right? So I think the great line that's almost an exact quote, right? 25% of something is better than 73% of nothing. If there's nothing here for you to tax, then you're not getting any money. You're giving them money back when they're billionaires. If they're keeping all of their money here, at least you're getting 25% of what they have here, right? So these statistics are spun in such a way to make you feel as though it is horrific and against your best interest for Republicans or conservatives to want lower tax rates for people with more money domestically. But it has been shown statistically in the past, if we have lower tax rates, the amount of tax revenue effectively that is brought in is higher. That being said, taxation is theft. Fuck taxes. But them's is the breaks as far as the numbers go. So I just had to make sure. The show is still the show. I just want to make sure you guys know where we're at, right? One section, again, that I found very helpful was about words, right? The different way that words are used to enforce these different statistics. And I even actually have one reading, I think I only have two readings, one about violence, and then one that I thought was just a really great section of this book. We learned in the review preview for the 2023 stack, this book is not quotable out of context, right? So there's not much that I could pull as far as good readings. But I'll tell you what, when I got to that point in this book, I thought, this makes a whole lot more sense now that I have read up until now than it did when I read it on the show. So one of the things that he talked about was, one of the words that he talked about was violence, right? Let's see. This is from page 129. Violence. It may not be surprising that an incessant drumbeat of declarations that disparities of outcomes among groups demonstrate malicious treatment of the less successful can promote resentments and violence. What is remarkable is how even outbreaks of violence fail to lead promoters of the invidious social vision to reconsider what they are saying. Instead, it often leads to simplify Jesus Christ. I'm not doing this. What he's talking about essentially is the fact, leave it all in. What he's talking about is the fact that we have taken the word violence from meaning actual physical violence harming somebody to saying silence is violence and your words are violence, right? People intentionally misappropriating words to fit their narrative so they can reinforce these statistics of disparity and discrimination, that even though this is a really horrific example, right? But this is really some shit that we hear that, like, I'm telling you, you've heard it. It's so, black people historically have been beaten when they were slaves and stuff like that. And we're not doing that now, but we're violent with our words to them. We discriminate them with our words. This is really the type of shit that you hear. And that's what he's talking about, right? Is violence. That words like this are misappropriated to intentionally reinforce the horrific views that these people have about our country and our society. Another thing that goes along with the same thing is like, why these numbers, why these groups? It just falls along with the same thing that he questions that a lot. Let me see this one reading. Let's see if this is going to be worth. Okay, so this is the one reading I think that I have. We'll see from page 148, and this is about freedom. This is why I pulled this out of here. Freedom is not some new or esoteric concept. It is a concept widely understood and deeply felt for centuries, especially deeply felt by those who did not have freedom, such as slaves, serfs, prisoners, and people living under a totalitarian dictatorship. Many such people have made desperate attempts to escape to freedom, even at the risk of their lives. This was not done to get government benefits. Spartacus was not fighting to get farm subsidies or housing vouchers. Yet many intellectuals living in the safety and comfort of free societies have found it expedient to redefine freedom so that an expansion of government determination of economic outcomes through an expansion of government compulsion is not seen as a trade-off of freedom, but as simply an expansion of freedom as conveniently redefined. In the world of words, the hardest facts can be made to vanish into thin air by a clever catchword or soaring rhetoric. In a public discourse where slogans and images have too often replaced facts and logic, words have indeed become for some what Hobbes called them, centuries ago, the money of fools, often counterfeit money created by clever people. Our education system, which might have been expected to develop students' ability to, quote, cross-examine the facts, as the great economist Alfred Marshall once put it, has itself become one of the fountainheads of insinuations and obfuscations.
Base Thomas Sowell.
Base Thomas Sowell. That will end the review portion of this review preview. And I think if you read this whole book, Trenton, you will understand. We will now enter the preview portion. Our March book is 1984 by George Orwell.
Yes.
Okay, why are we doing this? Because it's a fucking classic, of course, right? And as cliche as it sounds, this novel feels like it becomes more and more real all of the time. So it's going to be really fun and entertaining and enlightening vision of what our world could become, right, if we aren't careful. So we're going to be able to go through this, kind of identify some really scary parallels and be like, this is really fucked up. I forgot about this. It's been high school since I read this, blah, blah, blah. I read this last year as one of my side books during the book club, so I'm excited to read it again. George Orwell, of course, 1984. This was a pen name. It's a pseudonym of Eric Blair, 1903 to 1950. Died young as hell. Was born in Bengal and educated in Eton. After service in the Indian Imperial Police in Burma, he returned to Europe to earn his living penning novels and essays. He was essentially a political writer who focused his attention on his own times, a man of intense feelings and fierce hates. An opponent of totalitarianism, he served in the Loyalist forces in the Spanish Civil War. Besides his classic Animal Farm, which is another great one, I also read that one as a side book, his works include a novel based on his experiences as a colonial policeman, Burmese Days, 2 first-hand studies of poverty, Down and Out in Paris and London, and The Road to Wygon Pier, an account of his experiences in the Spanish Civil War, Homage to Catalonia, and the extraordinary novel of political prophecy whose title became part of our language, 1984. George Orwell. I mean, you guys know what this is. The back of it, the year 1984 has come and gone, but George Orwell's prophetic, nightmarish vision in 1949 of the world we were becoming is timelier than ever. 1984 is still the great modern classic of negative utopia, a startlingly original and haunting novel that creates an imaginary world that is completely convincing from the first sentence to the last 4 words. No one can deny the novel's hold on the imaginations of whole generations or the power of its admonitions, a power that seems to grow, not lessen, with the passage of time.
And that's not a good thing.
No, it's not. As they said, it was originally published in 1949, which is wild. And it was done, let's see, Harcourt Incorporated, 1949. So we can do page and pace. Like you said, it is 309, I think I said. Something like that. 312. Let's see. 312. Nope, that's not it, because this is an appendix. It's 2-something. 298, that's what it was.
298.
And the page of pace was 9.6.
Check.
So 31 days, 9.6, not bad. I think that last year, I think the record for it is still Rubicon. Rubicon was at like 13 pages or something like that. That one was tough. That was a slog, but it was good. It was worth it. I enjoyed it. 1984 is going to be worth it as well. Not such a slog. It'll be great. So that is it. We'll pick a random place to do a reading. We'll call it good.
I'm curious because I love this book,
Okay.
so I'm curious if I recognize the scene.
Page 152. Here we go. Sometimes, too, they talked of engaging in active rebellion against the party, but with no notion of how to take the first step. Even if the fabulous brotherhood was a reality, there still remained the difficulty of finding one's way into it. He told her of the strange intimacy that existed, or seemed to exist, between himself and O'Brien, and the impulse he sometimes felt simply to walk into O'Brien's presence, announce that he was an enemy of the party, and demand his help. Curiously enough, this did not strike her as an impossibly rash thing to do. She was used to judging people by their faces, and it seemed natural to her that Winston should believe O'Brien to be trustworthy on the strength of a single flash of the eyes. Moreover, she took it for granted that everyone, or nearly everyone, secretly hated the party and would break the rules if he thought it safe to do so. But she refused to believe that widespread, organized opposition existed or could exist. The tales about Goldstein and his underground army, she said, were simply a lot of rubbish which the party had invented for its own purposes and which you had to pretend to believe in. Times beyond number, at party rallies and spontaneous demonstrations, she had shouted at the top of her voice for the execution of people whose names she had never heard and in whose supposed crimes she had not the faintest belief. When public trials were happening, she had taken her place in the detachments from the Youth League who surrounded the courts from morning to night, chanting at intervals, "Death to the traitors!" During the 2 minutes' hate, she always excelled all others in shouting insults at Goldstein. Yet she had only the dimmest idea of who Goldstein was and what doctrines he was supposed to represent. She had grown up since the Revolution and was too young to remember the ideological battles of the 50s and 60s. Such a thing as the independent political movement was outside her imagination, and in any case, the party was invincible. It would always exist, and it would always be the same. You could only rebel against it by secret disobedience, or, at most, by isolated acts of violence, such as killing somebody or blowing something up.
Oh, that's good. I think it's after he meets his girl, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
But also after he gets the book.
Yes. This is going to be a great book. I'm really excited to do this. There's going to be a lot more tweets to come, a lot more conversations going. This is going to be a better, more entertaining review preview the next time around. But I think we figured this out. I think it's going to work out well. Producer extraordinaire Big Bird is going to get everything together. So, of course, I want to thank you for joining me for the review preview for February and March. My name is Donovan. I've been here from Salt of the Streets. Of course, we have our Instagram, our Patreon, our YouTube, everything at Salt of the Streets. You can find all of that at saltofthestreets.com. You can find my own personal social media. I'm at Salt of the Street on Twitter. That's where all the tweets are going to be at, right? And at alpaca_Donovan on Instagram. Colin is at Big Bird Offie on both of those things. Everything at saltofthestreets.com. Go to the Patreon. Subscribe. Read some of the articles, right? Help us make more stuff just like that. If you like what we're reading or writing, tell us that. Give us more money. We'll write more things for you. We'll do that. We're for hire. Until then, keep looking up, and I love you.
Welcome to the Salt of the Streets, coming at you every week with this food for thought. Hope you ready to eat.